Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Liz, of course, and I am joined by the real Sam Prentice. So let's just start by saying, why are you the real Sam Prentice?
Why am I the real one? Because so there have obviously other people have got my name, right? So I'm the real one because you don't get any realer than being yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that started happening when I started getting involved with Star Wars and social media is people would end up getting tagged on my accolades. So for my birthday one year, another Sam Prentice got tagged, and he is a gay artist living in Brighton that was nothing to do with Star Wars. And it kind of became a bit of a running joke. So the real element is very much about the person that did the thing rather than the person that didn't do it, but is actually known for something else completely. So that's it. It's not all that, but it is what it is. So I've just run with it since then.
Yeah, and that's the thing with having a username. But if your username is your name, yeah,
Exactly.
that could be a thing. So now we know.
Exactly.
Now we know. So, where are you from?
I'm south of London. I'm about 30 miles
Mm-hmm.
south of London, just up the road from Windsor.
All right.
Mhm.
And what do you do?
What do I do? Okay, so I run a business which
Mm-hmm.
is a e-waste recycling business. We're basically one of the largest in the country now, which is pretty awesome. Started from nothing, and I'm a content creator and a variety of other things that I do that is kind of co-linked to 3D printing and prop
Mm-hmm.
making and other bits and pieces, which has led me into film and TV work.
All right. So from e-waste to, well, of course, all of this, it's not all like, it doesn't necessarily interconnect. How did you start with the droid making and the prop building?
Okay, so there's a group online called the UK R2 Builders, and
Mm-hmm.
I was one day watching Star Wars. It just happened to be on the TV, and pretty much if you look deep into any television program, you will see some sort of link to Star Wars in one way, shape, or form. And it becomes painfully apparent when you're involved with Star Wars in quite a big way, because everything you look at, from Family Guy to The Simpsons to whatever might be on the TV, Rick and Morty, whatever, ends up having some kind of Star Wars element and connotation to it. It's just a thing that's in life now.
Yes.
So that was on the TV, and I'd had a wine, and I decided that it was going to be a brilliant idea to build an R2D2. So I went onto this group. I got added by a guy called Oliver Steeples, and I didn't know who he was. And the story is that I was laughing because I thought, oh, one of the nerds has just added me from the R2 Builders. The next day, I Googled his name, and it turned out he was one of two people that built the R2D2 for the new series of the films. So episode
Wow.
7 and 9, that was the three R2D2s that he and another chap called Lee Towersey, again, another good friend of mine, built for the films. So that's kind of how that started. And then it sort of took on what you'll probably notice about me is when I get my teeth into something, I tend to do it big. So it might be droid building, it might be 3D printers, it might be something prop making, whatever it might be. But it tends not to just stop with a, hey, I've done this. It tends to be, what's the maximum I can possibly do with that? And of course, going from building a robot to then building a robot for a film, and then a robot for red carpet events and press junkets and TV work, and all that kind of stuff. It ends up being, that's kind of a bit of a job. And at that particular point in time, and as you alluded to earlier, I've got a 2-year-old son now. Time was certainly more apparent around that sort of stage, and the accessibility to things like 3D printing was pretty dire at that particular point. But yeah, I think that kind of goes some way to answer the question there.
Yeah. So, what was your, I guess, out of all of that, how did you get fully connected to Lucasfilm? I'm going to bring up some pictures in a second,
Sure.
but share that story while I get all this set
Sure.
up.
So, Grant was just mentioning there about the e-waste business. And the funny thing about the e-waste business is we do tend to get a lot of working bits and pieces that come in. So, at quite an amount of time, most of the cabling that you're seeing, any of the def racers or anything that I build will generally be repurposed from e-waste. So if I can use something that is, essentially coming in the building that is ultimately scrap, so batteries, cables, motors, that kind of thing, I'll always tend to try and find something that's ultimately going to be allowing that to happen. But so Oliver was involved with the film. Lee is still involved with the films, and anything that you pretty much see that's been filmed at Polymaker Studios or in the UK, Lee will be some way, shape, or form involved with that. So Lee was the lead puppeteer, and he hate me for saying that, but the lead operator for R2D2. So as you'll know, for R2D2, you would have had a person inside of R2D2, which is the two-legged version, and the three-legged version will be the remote control one. So every shot that you see in Star Wars that's two-leg, there is somebody inside of it. On the last film, it was a guy called Hassan, who is an absolute brilliant guy. But it would have been Jimmy V before that. And as I say, back in the 80s, again, there was another actor, Kenny Baker, that was involved with that early on, for the first 3 films or the second 3 films, whichever way you want to look at that. So the droid building and the robotics was something that was very much of an interest to me, and I got involved with the R2 Builders Club. I'm a committee member now for the R2 Builders Club, and I'm an MOT officer for the Builders Club. And I sort of got involved with charity in quite a big way. So my background is basically building droids, promoting Star Wars, and raising money for charity. And we've done a lot over the last few years for Mind, for Calm, for a variety of charities that affected people within that community. And we've raised a ton of money for that, which is absolutely epic. There became an opportunity where I built a droid for kind of myself, but also for the film. And when it went to a talent scout for Star Wars, I was able to submit that as being a droid that potentially could be used in the film. So what happens in a typical kind of Star Wars style is there'd be characters like Dio and various other things that are kind of created by contracted artists, and then it's down to the design team to basically make those props and make them functional. So there's 2 guys, mainly Matt Denton, who did Dio, and a guy called Joshua Lee, who are exceptional robotics guys. And Matt Denton, he's got a big YouTube channel where he does go-karts and other kind of weird and wonderful things there. He's one of the creative designers to make BB-8, for example. So he made that work and he made that move, and then Brian Herring was the puppeteer for that. So what happens is there's a creative sort of spill where people outside of the film industry potentially could get a look in. And if you've built a droid that isn't typically an R2D2, then at that particular point in time, people were quite interested in seeing those on screen. So J.J. Abrams, the director, basically picked my droid, and he didn't like So his vision of Star Wars is that the R2D2 should be the only droid that has the kind of circle dome. So I very, very quickly had to make a different dome. So I made an R6 dome, which I believe you might have a photo of it.
Yeah, let's see what I have here.
Yeah, so R6 is just up the top there. So the blue droid that you see there, that's the guy. So that's what that's R2 SHP. So I got to name the droids.
Oh, nice.
and with the dome at the top right hand corner, with the blue dome at the top right, that was LE5. So that was R6 LE5. So I've got a toy selection. So Disney made toys basically of the. Have you got one of those?
Yeah, let me see what I can.
There you go. So that's the droid that I built for the film. Look at all those photos. That's Chopper.
We love Chopper. He's one of my favorites. Okay.
That is me.
So we'll scroll through and then we'll scroll back through. Okay, so there we go.
Okay,
that's
so
fun. That's
yeah,
fun.
so this was really cool. This is a really cool moment because generally when you get something into Star Wars, everything tends to get like 10 times bigger. So we got Topps cards, we got trading cards, we got some very exclusive stuff. This was only in the Disney parks. So you've got Dio,
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
got you've got R5 2JE that is I operated on the films along with another guy called James, and then you've got my two, which is R6LE5 and R2 SHP. So obviously my name is Sam Prentice, so S&P is Sam Prentice, and my wife's name is Hannah, so Hannah is in the middle of that as well. So
Oh,
R2
nice.
SHP was the masculine programming. This was quite an interesting thing because in all the manuals that you can buy for like droid specific Star Wars stuff, because everybody's crazy for this stuff, they basically name a male and female, masculine and feminine programming for these droids.
Okay.
And I've never seen that before. It's the first time that they've done it, because when we were doing press junkets and you would perhaps ask R2D2 if he was male or female, and I say he, basically Disney don't like that. They didn't like the association with sex of a droid. But for the first time, the writers of this show decided that they were going to have masculine and feminine programming. So these are brother and sister droids. And
nice.
although it was one body, there was two different domes. Now, the R6LE5 is Les. So, as I mentioned before, one of the builders of R2D2 is a guy called Lee Towersey. Okay, we were at an event, and he was introduced as not Lee Towersey but Les Townsley. So, as you know me, right, I was having an absolute whale of a time dining out on that because it was so funny for me. And I decided to call the droid Les. And I got a call and Lee was saying, look, are you sure you want to call this Les? Because you can call it whatever you want. You know, we can have different. And I went, no, it's going to be Les. So when we're on set, it was called Les. But we didn't know it was going to be either masculine or feminine. So what happened, J.J. Abrams really liked that dome, the kind of the non-round dome. But I had to do that and had to make it really quickly. So I put that together in a few days, and the whole dome was fabricated as a 3D printed part.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that was Michael Badley, who I partnered with a ton of stuff. He basically had those sort of designs, and
let's see.
He was very, very quick to kind of having that made up. And then we did that on a CR10 S5. It took about, I think, 7 or 8 days to print. It was printed in some horrific pink, cheap, awful, before there was Polymaker, there was none of that at that time. It was just some awful stuff. So we fabricated that real quick, and it got into the film, which was pretty awesome.
Wow.
How serious I look in some of these photos. Dear, so there it is. Yeah. So that go back one. That was the that was LE5, and that was out of the magazine.
Wow.
We got into. So again, masculine and feminine programming, and it looks the business. And of course, when we just wanted to change the shot, or we changed to a different part of the scene, we would just swap the domes over. Now, what happened was we actually ran out of droids on set. And because I was there, we just decided that we would have 2 different droids. So
okay.
That got in. So that was actually, the SHP droid was shot on under the Tantive 5. So imagine walking into your first day at work on set on a Star Wars set, and you're in a jungle scene on the James Bond stage, and you've got the Tantive 5 is pretty much full scale above your head, with people sitting inside the ship and welding and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So that was kind of my first day, hiding behind a rock with a little radio control.
Wow.
So and there's the club. The guy in C-3PO there, he sadly passed away. His name was Pedge, and really, really bloody nice guy. And unfortunately, he contracted motor neurons disease, and sadly, he passed away a little while ago. And we raised money for the charity, and we did a whole load of work, to promote that charity. And as I say, we get a lot of, people sort of find us a lot of the time. You'd be a builder, and then there might be a family tragedy, meningitis or something might leap out and capture that builder, and we obviously try and rally around and try and do our absolute best for those people. So it's
that's one thing I found with Star Wars in general, is that most of the people are very generous, and they do all sorts of things for different charities.
Well, one further thing for Pedge is Pedge had, because so the story is he loved the blue SHP, so he did a blue chrome C3PO, and that was recently shot on, and I think it's in one of the latest series of the TV shows, and there's a guy in that costume that came from the UK, and there it is. That's an old CR10, and that was the dome, and it cost me about £30 to fabricate. And I decided during lockdown that I had a baby on the way, and I needed probably some money, so that dome actually sold for $10,000. Oh
wow!
Yeah, just the dome.
Yeah, that's the other thing about Star Wars people. They seem to have disposable income, or they find a way.
I could knock these out. I could knock those things out on the weekly, and that's people were happy to pay that. So we got the toy, so that was cool. And then furthermore, just before the toy came out, there was a really, really special edition where these metal droids came out. So again, we got SHP, which is here, and he got, even in the bottom here, that was shot on. That was one of the photos from on set. Of course, they 3D scan everything when you're there as well. So you get you get set onto this stage, and then there's about 1 million cameras, and it goes round and basically swivels around and they 3D scan everything. So
I have a feeling by IRF, I will have a shipment from Chris Perillo of all of his Sam Prentice related droids for you to sign. He'd be like, can you take care of that? Chris doesn't travel a whole lot, but he's actually traveling at the end of the month because he's turning 50, and so he's going to do the whole Disneyland Star Wars experience.
That's cool. I've not done that yet. I've not done that.
So you haven't been to Galaxy's Edge?
No, I've not been.
Oh wow!
I need to go. It was pending, and then COVID hit, and that was kind of the end of that. And so yeah, tricky.
I actually did. Yeah, I did Galaxy's Edge a month before COVID. My sister and my brother-in-law, we went, had the best day ever. I was actually talking about that last night with friends. It's like, I had the best trip to Florida that I'd ever had. Got to do Disney, got to relax, got to do this, got home, and then the world shut down. So yeah.
Just want to say hi to Joe. Hello, Joe. Sorry, I'm seeing people saying hello, and I feel really rude, but I'm not responding to anybody. I'm just like, ah.
So this was this the original? Oops, I'm just a professional here. Here we go.
So that's an R5 dome. So again, that was I think that was a 16-day print, and the idea was it's at quite a rough layer height there, because what we do is we putty fill it out. And then ultimately you'd then add the greeblies and other bits and pieces to it. And the thing is with props, it's very, very different to if you had a stormtrooper helmet, for instance, you'd have a hero variety and you'd have a stunt variety. So a lot of the background stuff is kind of chucked together, or in most cases, if you see like one of the Gonk droids, you might see that it's been repainted. It might have been the one that was in episode 9, but it's been repainted for The Mandalorian and shipped out to the US to be shot on. So a lot of the stuff that is, essentially put away is then modified and then reused later on.
Yeah. Disney does a lot of that too.
Oh god, yeah. It's why not? Why, if someone else has already fabricated it, why would you want to try and do it again? It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. So let's take a look at more pictures. So
3PO.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a resin printed head and C3PO that I actually haven't finished. It's one of those things that's been a bit of a labor of love. The idea with that was he was going to move around and sort of introduce the droid builders at an event. So if we did a Comic-Con or something along those lines, 3PO essentially would have been there saying hello to everybody, and it just cuts down on the man hours. So
nice. All right. Let's see what else we're going to look at here. More droids.
Cool. Yeah. So that so on the left-hand side there, that is Chopper from Rebels. and that's Imperial chopper. That was the first Imperial 3D printed chopper that was produced. There have been a few since, but that's fully 3D printed, that droid on the left. The one on the right was my first build, which is a droid called R2Q5, and a lot of the parts on that are 3D printed. So this is how I got into 3D printing. Was somebody said to me, you should buy a 3D printer, and I was like, really? But aren't they dangerous? And here we are today, of course. But what you could have done then versus what you can now do, it's completely different. The speed, the materials. I've still got that droid. The droid in that picture is this one in the background here. So, and whether or not I ever get rid of it or rebuild it is up for debate. There we go. That's an R7 droid or dome. That was a commission, actually. Someone asked me to make that, and then they didn't buy it. So they wanted me to ship it to them. They had me do it for them. And again, the thing is this is where things started changing for me, and getting into content creation, because I was printing stuff on a CR10 S5. In fact, at one point I had 3 of them. And the reason I had 3 of them is because I wanted to kind of make domes at a pretty rapid rate and then possibly sell them. So that was a potential thing that was going to happen. But of course, with the amount of fails you'd have, especially on a bed slinger, you get a lot of inertia in that bed is going. So I started doing things like, how can I upgrade the hot end? How can I upgrade the bed? How can I upgrade all these different things? Then it then started to be a kind of series on how to upgrade your CR10 S5. After that point, Creality kind of got a little bit kind of attracted to what I was doing. So I went and did an interview with them about droid building, sort of similar to what we're doing here. And then they asked me to do some work for them, basically interviewing other people. So we did that for a bit as well. Then my contact left, and any connection to Creality at that particular point just vanished.
Don't we love that?
Exactly. Well, that's just the way it is. You're talking to one person one day, and then they're just not there the next. So, no one ever knows what happens to them. But so that happened, and then I just started. Yeah, there you go. So that was my first ever printer, the Wanhao Duplicator i3. It was a dreadful printer and was prone to possibly burning up the motherboard at any given second. It was I think they're still in business, but God,
everyone has their first printer, don't they? This is the remnants of my first Focus.
Oh, it's a Focus, right? Okay.
Yeah, that was my first one. So
and again,
I still have the remnants.
The thing is with the Focus printer, though, Liz, is that at least you had like silent stepper motors and stuff. This was like starting up a 1980s video game. The wah, 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 and I had all this stuff put into a shed outside, and I'd go to bed and I can hear the printing noise, and you get to a point where if you don't hear it, you can't sleep. And then I'm freaking out going, oh my God, what if I need to do a filament change? Because at that time, filament, run out detection and stuff like that was a bit flaky. It probably still is, but it was a bit more flaky then. So I'd frequently go downstairs and go, oh my God, a 15-day print is just been ruined. So on the right-hand side there, you've got the original R5 with the clicky head, like the toy. The one in front of that is the R2 droid, again with the clicky head. Now, if you look at the photos that's just come out in one of the new series on the TV show, the clicky head droid is making a comeback. So, and I saw that today. So, if you're into your droids and you kind of fancy yourself as a bit of a droid connoisseur, then that's it. So, yeah, lots of domes being made up there. I've got a bigger house now. That was like part of the kitchen, and things just started taking over. So, yeah, it's
well, you have your now you have a space. Yeah, so let's talk about that. How you've graduated to sort of having your own space. Obviously, you have more than a screechy printer, and and so what's your situation now? How did you continue?
So as I say, so what happened was we went from the Creality CR10 S5s to then going out to the marketplace and looking. I did this quite a lot, looking for printers that are just better. And I found the Rat Rig and started talking to those guys. They're in Portugal, which isn't a million miles away from here. I bought one of their 500 printers and put a video on it. And that then sparked off a thing. You know, Clipper was just about to start making its way in. There was this really interesting, you know, those poignant moments where it's like, this is going to be great in about 5 minutes. That sort of happened. So everybody in the droid building community had CR10S5s. A lot of them still do. Then people then started transitioning over to Speedy Core XY printers, which is in the form of the rat rig. Now, obviously, we're at a stage where I'm touting K1s and Bamboo Lab printers, and people are still buying those because although it's not the huge print size, and we'll talk about that. So to print the dome, okay, you need 465 millimeters. Okay, so you can do it on a Creality M4 printer because that's 470. Okay. So really what we need to be a droid builder, you need a 500 printer. You can do it in sections, but really this is nice and rigid. The same goes for the body as well. That's 465 mil. So being able to pop that onto one of those beds and have it print was kind of the idea. So what you do with a rat rig or a Voron or any of those sort of bigger style printers is you lose the inertia because everything's done inside of the print head, and the bed obviously just goes down. So the problem that you have, if you put a couple of kilos onto bed sprung CR10s, you start getting gapping as you sort of print towards the top and you've layered up 2-3 kilos. All of a sudden you get a drop. So there's a ton of mods you needed to do in order to kind of make this work. So that's what I was doing. I basically just started modding and messing around with printers.
So what's this that we're looking at?
So this is Little Shop Horrors, the Audrey 2 3D print that I did, which is quite a small mouth with great big lips on it and stuff. And again, I did it because I could. And it was around that time I also did the Saw puppet, which I guess you guys will see around Halloween as well. He's on his bike and it's got a little robotic mechanism that moves around, freaks everybody out, which is kind of cool. So yeah, so that's it. So the 3D printing thing kind of happened that way, as I was printing parts which would take, you know, days and days and days to print. Didn't really have a clue about, you know, slicer setting. You know, Cura was really the only thing that you could get without having to pay silly money for a piece of software. And then I just started getting involved with reviews. So, you know, FL Sun, Creality, Anycubic later on, G-Tech, you name it. It's sort of been in an email box at some way, shape or form. And of course, when you're a maker, people and manufacturers especially like to see their products in your videos. But like I said earlier on, is that you?
Yes.
Wow. Boy, race
it's my motorcycle. Yeah.
Okay, right. You get to this point where you're not a maker, you end up just doing 3D printer reviews. And while that is an excellent, don't get me wrong, you know, I think there's a misconception. People go, oh, well, you get a free printer. But the thing is, it's not a free printer because there's an expectation. And the expectation is basically you're going to upsell that printer for a company for nothing. And sometimes the video will go ping and sometimes it will just totally flop. So as a content creator, you might spend 2 weeks doing the most amazing video. And if you look at my rat rig video and if you look at my V-Minion video where I incorporated fire and bought petrol to throw down and set fire to stuff and just did all these kind of mental videos, and it was just kind of like and then I'll just do something that I just throw together and then it will get decent views. It really doesn't make any sense. So where you think, oh, you get a printer for free, well, you might have to spend 2 weeks basically putting a video together for that with a certain element of critique. Then also as a content creator, then face the backlash of the manufacturer saying, well, we didn't like your video, to which you then have to say, well, send me a printer that works then, or send me one that's not a lemon, or send me one that you've actually done some quality control on. And that is, you know, again, as a creator, a very, very difficult position to be in. And then you end up in the end kind of gaining a level of respect, I think, from some of these companies, that if they sell you something bad or send you something bad, then you look at the ways to perhaps look to fix that and ultimately come up with a spin in the end. So let's say the Sovo SV06 Plus, there was a quality control manufacturing issue with the print head. Loads of people had the same issue where it just splurged everywhere. I said, send me a new print head, and they did that, and that was the result that I needed. So job done. Whereas there's other manufacturers that have no customer service and no customer support, which you then get into a position where you're like, well, I can't tell people this is a good printer when actually it's abysmal. And I don't want anyone that's watching the channel to go, well, you threw me a bone and actually it's a dreadful printer. But again, you can have one good product sent to me, and then you could have a Friday afternoon printer where somebody couldn't be bothered to screw the right things together. And you can never have it tried. I saw a K1 Max printer today on the K1 Max group being delivered, and no word of a lie, it was a box, and the UPS guy was pushing it side for about 20 meters. And I sent it to Creality, and I was like, this is a thing, guys. What is going on here? Your brand new printer. Can you imagine seeing that being delivered like that? Absolutely blew my mind. So, and it might not be the manufacturer's issue. It might be a delivery issue. So you go through this whole construct of you're getting a free printer. Yeah, but there's work to be done with that. And it is a lot of work, a hell of a lot of work. So that's return on investment.
Yeah.
So I've gone to a rant now about 3D printers.
No, and it's true. And someone did ask, what's the best printer that you would recommend? And it's one of those things where we've done entire episodes of Z and Z where we talk about all the pros and cons and what you want to look for and what you don't want to look for. But we're actually going to get into the reality of something, the reality of Creality, because after Murph, you hosted an event with Creality.
I did.
And I don't actually have a Creality printer. I really enjoyed the event. And there was some criticism about people who attended it. And I thought, I understand that there are issues with companies. In my opinion, I would rather know who potential players are so you can communicate with them, so you can keep lines of communication open, so you can express any issues that you might have, or get support where you might need support. I know for me, with my Focus, I had problems, and knowing Dora, who was like the only person that we really knew from Focus, as soon as the printer was available in Canada, she ended up sending me a new printer. She had sent me parts and everything else. And I do have a printer that does work. I'll be printing Toys for Tots on it. It doesn't have auto bed leveling and all these other things. So, it has its features and it's whatever. But I think the reality at least for North America, is that a lot of people, their very first 3D printer, if they don't have a Bamboo budget, it's going to be an Ender. And it's likely going to be like an Ender V3 or something that's a budget printer. So I think what's important, at least in my opinion, is to know how to use that printer, how to modify that printer, and then also, if you have problems, either hold a company accountable or be able to find some sort of support for it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so just to points, what's people are saying, what's the best printer or what would I suggest? But the funny thing is that it depends on what your budget, like you said, what your budget is, and it is very much about what you want to use that printer for. So the Wanhu, I think it was like a 150 by 150. I could print very, very small parts and greeblies on it. Certainly couldn't do a full dome on it. So the S5 sold very well, certainly in the droid building community, because we were printing big things. So can you imagine being a manufacturer and going, right, what's our target audience? Well, we don't know anybody that's our target audience, so we're just going to put an Ender out. So they put an Ender out, and actually it ends up being the most successful printer ever, right? Because the Ender 3 was exactly that. Mm-hmm. So how do we capitalize on that? Well, we'll make a slightly bigger one. Maybe we'll put some mods on it. We'll change this. And for me, Creality have always just been trying to chase that past success to no avail, because of a variety of reasons: quality control, customer service, and actually caring about the product. Because as soon as something comes out, it's old units, and they just want to, it's a cultural thing as well. Sell, and then the community will then look after it, because the community looked after the Ender 3. But to answer that question, the Sovol SV06 is an excellent first-time printer. It's cheap, it's reliable, you can buy parts for it, and the community is absolutely excellent for the money. You have one, I have one. The Focus, Dora went from Focus to Bamboo. She now works in customer support. Focus just dissipated. She'd sent me about 4, and I ended up giving them to the Cub Scouts and various other places and various other people. There's a lot of bad printers out there, and a lot of those bad printers are kind of based on technology like the Ender 3, and it's got a PIE bed, or it's got a direct drive, or it's got this, or it's got that. But it very much depends on what you want to do. Now, what we're seeing more and more, and we touched on this very, very early into the conversation, is that we're finding now we're going to have a generation of people coming through that have got Bamboo budgets, which is your terminology completely, and going, I've got it, it won't print, and that is a real problem. So, it as a content creator, really, we need to knuckle down and go, this is 3D printing 101. This is how you level a bed. This is how you use that printer. Unless you're Grant, of course, in which there's no hope at all for that. But you know what I'm saying. So this is a very interesting transition, because we went from Ender 3s and CR10s and that kind of machinery, bed slingers, to there was a point where I would say, wow, I'd love a Delta printer. Well, Delta printers are very complicated and you wouldn't be able to use it. Oh, okay, so I won't buy a Delta printer because somebody told me that it's really complicated. You don't want a Core XY printer because it doesn't do circles very well. Oh, well, in that case, then I better stick to having a bed slinger, because you're told a load of information out there and it's not factually correct, or it's based off an experience that one person had at one particular point in time, and the technology is now caught up with itself. So what we're seeing now is this renaissance now of 3D printing, where, wow, out of the box, there's these fast, super fast, 600 millimeters per second 3D printers that are printing a single layer benchy in 16 minutes. Wow, isn't that fantastic? Well, no, it's not actually. It's not that fantastic. And as I said on a stream the other day, Joseph Prusa came out and went, well, I value printers that print a little bit slower. Well, in that case, then buy a Core XY and just print a little bit slower on it. That's the answer to that, because Bamboo Labs have come in. They've definitely been a game changer. Creality with the K1 is certainly now trying to keep up with that. They've had some teething problems, but I think if they have a little bit of massaging of the product line and probably a little bit of better quality control and support, I think they potentially could be up for a very, very good printer. But having said all that, bed slingers are not dead. People are always going to go back to bed slingers because they're uncomplicated machines. So
and I think, like I said earlier, for a lot of people, this is still very much a hobby. So there's different levels of hobby. There are people that are we just attended the Midwest RepRap Festival. So these people are generally hardcore tinkerers. Yep. They love what they're making, they're building, they're always innovating. There's always, changes that they're making. Then you have someone like me who really enjoys 3D printing, but I just want to have my stuff done at the end of the day. I want very little frustration, and so if I can print something and it looks good and there's very little hassle, then I'm happy. So there's different there's all the different levels, and then there's people that have major projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, any Voron user that I know is always tinkering with their Voron. Any rat rig builder is always doing something to something.
Yeah.
So if you want, really and truly, up until very recently, Prusa was definitely the way to go. And for a lot of my build projects, and we'll touch on that in a minute, the actual builds that I do, a lot of that stuff was done on Losbots and Prusa printers. Now I have a Bamboo Lab farm, and I also have a number of Creality printers as well, of the modern Core XY variety, K1 and the Max and stuff. So that's right now my go-to printers of a certain size are those. I'm also going to be having a Modex on loan, which is a 1200 by 600 printer for a very big project that we're going to, really excited about it actually, that we're going to be having. If you imagine Death Racers, but you can get inside of the racer and race it around a track.
Wow.
That is honest. I'm going to do a Guinness World Record and try and do the fastest 3D printed car that is electric, should do about 60 mile an hour.
Oh, wow.
And we're looking to also replicate that. I'll tell you about it. We're also looking to replicate that in the USA as well. So when we go to Murph, one of those things will be there, and there'll be potential for people to get in it and actually drive around a track. That's going to be
wow.
And then possibly the next year, you might find that people are able to then, build 500 by 500 printers, or we may end up creating things to be a bit smaller. So you can actually build one of these and they do a considerable amount of speed safely, to say the least. So yeah, so I mean, there's a ton of projects and stuff that, that we are amongst. And of course you saw the Death Racers, and a derivative of that is then the Drag Racers, which is Scott's thing.
Yes.
And these are all just creative ideas that, I wanted to go to America and do something, and Joel Telling was kind of the man in my eyes of, potentially something I could do, or somebody I could work with, and then that's manifested into a whole new thing. So, but on Murph, that what you were saying about the whole Creality Sharefest situation, I'll be completely honest with you, and I'll tell Creality straight. I and we as a community very much saved from a sinking ship, because they had a robotics thing that they were trying to get off the ground. They thought people were going to print these robot things, and I was concerned because I was thinking, are they talking about the Death Racers, or are they talking about they turned out they were talking about a thing, and of course they showed up and no one had done the thing because it was badly executed, and nobody had promoted it. So the first point was, we had a beauty contest with the Death Racers, which, if you don't know what a Death Racer is, it's a little battle robot where you've got to decapitate the racer's head. It's all 3D printed, and it happens at these festivals. The next one's going to be at Earth, and then Smurf after that. So they asked if they could get involved with that. So I said, yeah, of course. I'm happy to help anybody out, be it whoever. I don't really care. People won prizes. That was awesome. And then something else that was penned in for me was to host the Creality Sharefest. Now, when I heard the words host, I thought that was going to be shaking a few hands, very much just doing a hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this is our, the people from Creality, they're going to get on with it. What I wasn't expecting is to MC a 4-hour event. I hadn't heard anything negative, but I think there was certainly an expectation that it was going to be bad, because nobody really understood what it was. And 6 minutes before I turned up at the venue, I didn't understand what it was either. So, it was a very weird event, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And that wasn't just because of the cocktails.
Yeah, cocktails are great though. It was fun. It was really fun. Like I said, I went there. I got to see people in a more intimate space than I had been able to spend with them the entire weekend. I thought it was a good start for something different.
Yeah, and the thing is, the problem with Creality and a lot of other Chinese manufacturers is that they don't communicate effectively, and a lot of the issues that we have is this east-west divide, and I'm seeing it more and more. And when they were over, I was saying, look, there are these problems, and you don't necessarily see them because you're all about selling a product, as many units as you can, and then you move on to the next product. The longevity of you maintaining that product has always been down to, in Creality's eyes, down to the community. But they don't then have any community leaders. So if you had various people that would be like, I can see that you've got this problem. Don't worry, though. I can get you 10 new beds. I can get you this many new nozzles, and actually working with Creality to be that conduit. Really and truly, that's kind of what they need. And that isn't a job for me because I've got no interest in doing that. But there are other people out there in that community that could be led with that. So we had some really interesting conversations with Creality, and there are ongoing conversations with Creality, and I suspect you're going to see them at another Rip Festival coming up in the States soon. And again, there might be another Sharefest that I'm connected to with that. So, I wouldn't write them off completely. I know people have had bad experiences with them, and I think what I'd like to do with them is with any 3D printing manufacturer is humanize exactly what the processes are. So I think if we, from a Western point of view, have a better idea of what is actually going on, and Liz, when you turned up at that Creality event, that it was what I would call in the UK a bugger's muddle. It was a S show. It was one of those things where it's like, oh, I got to sit here for 4 hours and put up with this, and we kind of had to make it our own. So that was, I think that
exactly. And that's when you got K2 grabbing the mic and saying his piece and the Alleluias and
the Lord's Prayer, of course, which was one of those one of those things. But again, I think they're trying to do better, and if you think you can't bear to deal with them again, then that's your choice.
No, and it's always good to keep companies accountable. It's one of the nicest examples that came to full fruition at Murph was Luby.
Yes.
Louise is a model designer, and she had one of her models that was obviously copied from somewhere, and there was some sort of miscommunication, and it appeared as part of the bamboo basically holiday display. I think it was the dog that sat on the porch, and it was her model, and she wasn't credited. So immediately there was a bit of a witch hunt. There was, it was a weekend. Of course, these things always happen on a weekend where people said, that's her model and you stole it from her and shame on you. But Bamboo immediately said, we'd love to compensate you. We'd love to work with you. And what can we do to make this better? So now I met her. Actually, I was really pleased to meet her because I've actually printed a lot of her models.
She's from the UK as well.
Yeah, and so I met her at Murph, and she had 3 bamboos on the table. One of them is hers, and 2 of them Bamboo sent. And those bamboos that she was printing with and sharing all of her models and everything, they're going to go to schools. So it's turned into something so much better. And I think a lot of the time, I've worked in all sorts of communities, so this is just another one. I think that there's always a way to sort of turn things around or make things better. I've worked with Polymaker on Toys for Tots. There's always a way to. They have nothing to. They actually. I love what Polymaker does, and that's actually a really good example of a company that has. They're from China, but they take really different perspective on things. Nicholas, they are lucky to have Nicholas, and what he does is he really wants to support projects. So if you have a really interesting project that you're working on, he doesn't look at your numbers. He doesn't actually even follow up to see if you're tweeting, if you're sharing on YouTube, all of those sorts of things. He counts on there's a certain amount of trust that if he supports your project by sending you filament or whatever is done for the project, that you'll do the project. So he helped us print thousands of toys for Toys for Tots last year through MakerDeck, and we're going to be doing more of that. And I'd like to get other filament companies involved. It's funny because IC3D makes filament, and everyone was like, "Oh, how do you have Polymaker involved in this?" I'm like, because the end result is that more kids all over the US are going to get some 3D printed toys with their Toys for Tots parcels.
Totally. It's all about the greater good.
Why not?
And that's the same for charity. That's the same for, and what you might not know, Liz, but I know Raw Nomi knows that I'm a big supporter of STEM, like a huge supporter of STEM. And the Deaf Racer in schools, battle racers, it gives the opportunity to do CAD, to do electronics, to elements of science and maths and stuff. So that whole project is a STEM project that just needs to be hatched into schools. One of the part of the conversations that we were having was all about STEM, and I'm really, really interested in anyone that wants to be creative and ultimately develop other people. And I've done a lot of teaching. I was a kickboxing instructor for a little bit of time, and teaching kids and lots of other kind of weird and wonderful education. And of course, YouTube is an education, because you're on there. We're going to go and subscribe to your channel, watch your channel, because you're going to give them a certain degree of taught education. So that for me is strictly very important. And what myself and Michael Badley are behind with any of these projects is all about, it's not about the numbers on YouTube, it's about community and inspiring people. And I think if I could live the rest of my life and someone goes, yeah, there was a guy years ago, I met him at a Rep festival, and I built this, and then from that idea I then went on and did this amazing thing, and I've had this brilliant life, and I've helped other people, and ultimately paved the way for the rest of his life. I think that's an enormously proud accomplishment to have been able to do that. And I was in a meeting with Michael Badley the other day, and he says, the good thing about you, Sam, is that you tend not to care too much. And by that, he meant, I don't need this. I don't need YouTube. I don't need that. I don't care enough about it to be a huge artifact in my life. But what I do care about is people and the community, and helping people. And if anybody messaged me and we wanted help, I will always try my best to help people. And of course, as that grows, I can see some of the bigger creators out there, that would be a real difficult conversation to have. Imagine emailing Joel Telling, asking him for a clipper config. It's just something that you generally wouldn't do. But I've got droid builders. I've got one at the moment. She's just bought a rat rig. She needed to work out how macro works, so I'm working with her on that at the moment. So there's things that at that ground level, you're still helping people, and you're still making content, and there's so much more to come out of this. And as I said earlier, I came that close just as I was coming out of Chicago. I was like, do you know what? I might just think about this a bit more. And I had an epiphany, and now I've got a slightly different view on things, which I think is awesome. And I've had some amazing experiences, but that doesn't happen without real hard work and putting the time and putting the effort in, because you can, and I'm a victim of that, really, because I was one of those kids at school that probably wouldn't amount to much. And yet I'm flying to America. I'm flying to all sorts of different locations. I'm filming lots of really interesting content, and I'm speaking to people that perhaps most people wouldn't generally speak to. And it's enormously bizarre, but also gratifying kind of moment for me, because when you're told you're no good for the majority of your life, and actually you make something of yourself, well, that's pretty damn good. But the rationale behind all this is actually, and certainly when I had my son, I know now that it's very much all about him and making sure that he's got and is set up for the rest of his life. And that is, again, you don't get that until you're at that position. You understand how that all kind of works. So yeah, it's, you want to know what the real element is. This is how real it is. It's, getting up every day, doing the things that I do, and making content and speaking to people, dealing with companies, and it's literally a full-time job now. So, interesting.
So what's next? I know you've hinted that there's a few different projects. What is next? What can you talk about?
So we've got the go-kart thing that we don't actually have a name of yet. And that is, Guinness World Record attempt, fastest 3D printed car, or whatever the categories are going to sort of end up be. That should do about 60 miles an hour. The one that we have, there's going to be a co-build. There's going to be one built in the UK, and there's going to be one built in the US. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, Ryan Reed, who you will know, they're the guys that did the Back to the Future car, and that group. I'm hoping that they're going to get involved with this and build the one for the US. So when I go out to the US, there's already one there, and then obviously we can talk about that. And again, it's another STEM project, and it's computer-aided design. How do you get metalwork and engineering and motors and batteries and solar panels and all that kind of stuff and put it into something that moves? And that, again, it just lends itself to all that kind of stuff. There's a ton of stuff that I want to do. There's a BBC junkyard challenge I think they had in the US. They're doing a kind of format where I'm the 3D printing expert, which is kind of weird. So there's a BBC show that I'm hoping to be filming on that. I'm looking at doing a documentary literally about what I was talking about, the East and West divide. That is in the works at the minute. We've got a pilot that's going to be hopefully filmed, and I'm hoping to do stuff with Creality, Bamboo Lab, Anycubic, E3D, Slice Engineering, a load of people that perhaps have generalized stereotypical misconceptions about themselves, and looking at the human condition. It's such a weird subject, looking at the human condition about, and one term that came to mind by the guy that's filming and producing it with me, he said made in China. And it's one of those things where, you know, you pick up a product and go, huh, it's made in China. That whole thing for me is, just because it's made in China doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. But at the flip side to that, the stereotypical side of that is, well, it could be bad. So how do we educate to make it better? So if Creality brought out the next big thing and the next big printer, and they had maybe some level of community support behind it to maintain it, to beta test it, similar to what Prussia's just done with the XL. Lots of people had those printers, you know, and I'm going, well, I didn't get one, you know, what's wrong with me? But, you know, again, it's a unique set of skills that Prussia was going to be looking for to get those printers out there and tested. And, you know, as we all know, Prusa is a big maintainer of support and intelligence, and it's all about the data for them. So if they have a problem with something, then they're not going to want to replicate that 100 times in a makerspace. So, So as I say, more Deaf Races coming up. We've got the East Coast Rep Festival. We are giving away a Bamboo Lab printer as one of the main prizes. That's an exclusive. No one knows about that. You do now. Reasons to go to Deaf Racer. Maker are giving away, if you do a Polymaker Deaf Racer, they give you a $150 voucher for filament. That will go some way to, you know, compensating you for your racer. If you win the race with Polymaker, there's a $300 voucher. There's a whole ream of stuff, printers, and Big Tree Tech are involved. So, as I say, again, part of my thing is we go out, we do these races at these rep festivals. We've got Smurf, we've got Rocky Mountain next year. Murph want us back, and I suspect if Earth goes ahead again, then we'll be back for that. So it looks like I'm going to be around for a while doing things. But we want to make them bigger and better. So again, the 3D printed car project, it's not going to be like a two or four seater. It's going to be a one seater thing. But I just kind of feel like that's a cool thing to do. So the CAD models, the block work for that's already been made. There's a 3D printed gearbox in this. So that is, again, another big thing with Polymaker, where we're actually going to be hopefully making material that is going to be gearbox ready. So you can swap these things in and out as and when you need to. And again, you can change the gear ratios off of the motor. So yeah, that's cool. Hey,
so when you're not printing, Wexter's here. That's someone who has lots of things that. So do you? I noticed recently on social you started to share a couple smaller things you've printed. So it's not always giant. So what do you enjoy printing when you're not working on a giant project? Or do you enjoy printing when you're not working on a giant project?
You know what? So this is bad, but right now the printers are all doing nothing, and it's a painful thing. There's a really interesting thing where if you've got 8 printers, it's a really interesting problem to have. You've got 8 printers that are able to chew through kilos and kilos of filament. But if you don't have that filament, then they are not on. So I'm doing the Bender robot at 50% at the moment from Futurama. I will be revising the Saw puppet for Halloween. So that's the little cycling kind of weird little wood puppet for that. What else am I working on? We've got the Polymaker droid here. This is being refurbished for Earth. So this is a little blinky, weird little kind of contraption that I came up with a few years ago. God, what else are we doing? Yeah, I mean, I think we're mainly waiting for this next big project. But yeah,
So do you ever just go on printables or things and like print off a little vase or something?
Well, did
Ever
you see
just
my
go,
giant carrot?
oh yeah, yes, okay, you've done okay.
So I did a giant carrot. And I did a small carrot, and then my business partner was like, "Can you do us a bigger carrot?" So I did him a 290% carrot, and that was by PA1 Maker, whoever that is. I don't know them personally, but I supported them on Patreon, and I like to try and support people for a while, and then just sort of skip around and see what else is going on. I recently got a resin printer from Anycubic, and it's the M5S, and I think that is a brilliant machine. And the reason it's so good is because it just prints. There's no messing around. It's messy because all resin printers are messy, but it's on an app. And I love app-based 3D printing. So Bamboo Labs is for the win. Anycubic in this case is for the win. And I was in a meeting with Anycubic today, and I was like, you've got to put this on more of your printers as you release them. So, none of these companies are being slouches. They've all seen what Bamboo Labs has been able to achieve, and I suspect now the replicas of that technology is going to be very, very apparent. But mark my words, next time I'm in a room with Creality, I'm going to nail down this whole Clipper Creality OS stuff, and I think some of the stuff I've got coming up, I think people are going to be a little bit shocked when I start asking the questions that nobody else really wants to ask somebody to their face. And I think they need it, if I'm honest.
That's the thing. Okay, so there's the thing. There are people that are always willing to ask these questions online. They're always willing to say these things online. You see it on YouTube comments, you see it on Twitter and everything. But when you're in front of someone's face, whether they're a company or an individual, it does become a different thing. It becomes a different thing. And then you have someone like a Kevin who's more than willing to speak up at an event as he's receiving a prize. But it's true. Then there are people that will sort of, try to be a little more polite, or just shy away from any sort of, I don't know. To me, it becomes it's important that we have people that are not just keyboard advocates, but people who are like you, that are more than willing to speak up. I think it's
as Mike said yesterday. I think I don't care. If Creality never work with me again because I've asked them a question, then that's on them. That's not really on me. Yeah. And I'm not in it for this. If the community want to ask a question and they're not getting the answers, I think I know what the answer is going to be. And I think the reason that they did it the way they did it, and breaching the licenses and all the rest of it, is because they wanted to protect the printer as they released it, because they wanted a successful release. And then at some point very soon, I suspect they'll open it up so you can install Clipper on there, and it'll be vanilla Clipper, and it won't be Creality. It will be your own thing. But up until that point, if you don't know what you're doing with Clipper and the hot end smashes into the bed and you completely wreck the printer, are you then going to expect Creality to then replace that printer free of charge when you've done modifications to it? The answer is no. The answer is no. All day long, the answer is no. Yeah. But there will be people out there who will say, I want you to replace it. And then they're going to be even worse off because they've learned that from past mistakes. CR6 with the fire issues, Tripod's Garage, the whole thing. This is a Creality event, by the way, at ShareFest, where Tripod was sat there, and Tripod and Creality, for a very, very long time, despised each other. So, we're building bridges here. People are being changed out. There's a new process. And I'm hopeful, and I think Bamboo Labs needs competition. And I don't know necessarily if Creality are that much of a competition. They've released a couple of printers that seem to be, in my opinion, pretty good now that we've, I was the first one to stream it. I was the first one to break it. And as I said at the time, I thought, honestly, hand on my heart, Creality are going to throw me under the bus with this, and they're going to send it to Joel Telling. Joel Telling will get 1 million views on it, and I'll be forgotten about. And what ended up happening is Creality, how can I put this? I said I wasn't going to do ShareFest for them until they resolved the issues, and I kind of held them to ransom, but I had to do that because I wasn't getting results that I needed. And I'm not riding into town on my horse and, firing shots into the salon. It is just what it is. And I thought I was going to get thrown under the bus, which was a shame because I got good numbers out of the last couple of things I did with that. And, again, that's money, isn't it, at the end of the day? So it's a weird one, but I've got visions of me traveling to China and literally kicking a door down and saying, right, let's ask these bloody questions because we need answers to them. And I hope in some way, shape or form, they're receptive to that. And I think that'd be good. That'd be good media.
Yeah. And that's a community-wide thing too. I think there's times that there's misunderstandings, and the big thing is to keep the lines of communication open. If you don't understand why someone said something, done something, even if they printed something, like people, I think part of it when it comes to community in general, part of it does have to do with COVID, because when we all went back to our homes and stayed inside for a long time, I think some people lost some of their communication skills especially when it came to things that upset them. So
I think the way that people express themselves is in some ways either really bizarre or certainly diluted, and that's a dangerous thing as well. So especially for mental health. And again, like I said earlier on, the Droid Builders did a lot with Calm, campaign against living miserably. We went across. So we took an R2D2 across the Humberside Bridge, which is a very, very popular suicide spot in the Midlands, and we got BBC coverage. We're on the news. There's me running along, sweating profusely with this R2D2 as it was going across this track, and we raised a load of money for that. And the builder felt that it was really the right thing to do and try and create awareness in the most bonkers way. But we were part of that, and mental health, especially in lockdown, was such a horrible thing. And I'm seeing it even now where people are coming out of relationships or going into relationships or are in abusive relationships, and they need the help and the support. And you don't ever know truly what someone's really going through. So when you put something on Facebook, when you write a comment, when you put something nasty in a description, and I'm not going to be happy about being a target for anything like that, but you just don't know what's going to push somebody over the edge. And we're still living in very testing times. And for a lot of people, 3D printing is the ultimate release. Being able to create something and go, "God, look at that! Look at this cat that I just printed. Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? What do you mean it's hollow? Yeah, you can do that." It's a talking point. It validates people. People get a rush out of doing that, and then they can test their own sort of skills with things if they so wish to.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's a breed of people that want to tinker. There's people that just want to print. There's people that want to do all sorts of stuff in between it all. And being an advocate for that is nothing short of a positive thing. So
that's one thing I found is there's so many people that find it therapeutic. There's so many people that like we said, it is, for so many people, it's a hobby, it's a stress reliever. It is a cause of stress. Like right now, I have that printer turned off. I'll turn it back on later.
So you could be right. It can be the happiest moment or the most stressful time because it just, but it's those emotions that I think it's also quite important that you flex those emotions and you understand what those things are. So it's finding your happy place and understanding what that is. And sometimes a happy place can be when you're down in the dumps and really miserable, and sometimes it can be something else. So you can change that because you are yourself. So
absolutely. So I have one last question.
Go for it.
For our interview. What is something? I mean, we've learned a lot today, but what is something we don't know about you?
What is something we don't know about me? Oh my God. Okay. So I'm a black belt kickboxer. I once interviewed very highly for the Apprentice TV show in the UK. God, is there anything else? There's a photo that I didn't send you. I was in, do you have Waitrose in the US or Canada? Waitrose. It's kind of like it's like a posh superstore, like Walmart,
Okay.
but like
Okay.
not. I was once in a magazine dressed as a stormtrooper with the helmet off, talking about my weekend, which was a really weird thing to do. Lots of mums made comments on me and stuff. It was very, very bizarre. So, you know, I think one thing you might not have, well, you probably do already guess about me. I'm not afraid to put myself into certain positions that are important to me and important to other people. So, and again, as I touched on before, STEM, and Raw Nomi knows this as well as everybody else. You know, I do appreciate everything that other people do, and you've got to realize that it's not just you. It's about a community. It's anyone that does STEM and that's a teacher is an amazing human being, 100%, because it is the future. And I firmly believe that, you know, supporting somebody like that is absolutely 100% the best way that they can achieve anything. So there you go. There's a couple of things there. Don't know.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam, for joining me this afternoon. Thank you for sharing your time and your experience. People can find you, of course, on YouTube, on Twitter. I'll make sure that when this goes on YouTube, that the lawnmower is running, so you'll get to hear the lawnmower running past. This is great. All the links are in the description, and you can, you know, follow Sam and see what projects are next. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Go. Raw Nomi's just come on in, and weirdly enough, I was talking about her a couple of days ago because I was at the airport, as you know, and I'd just gone onto Twitch, and I don't generally Twitch. You kind of got me into looking at that thing, so I went on there, and she was talking about someone, and incidentally, she ended up talking about me, or it was about me, and I hit subscribe, and then it was really kind of a moment. But yeah, you know, that was a quite a nice moment for me, because, you know, you don't know, sometimes you don't know how you come across or how potentially you influence people potentially, you know, and she has some nice stuff to say. So thank you very much again.
She is the real Royal Nomi. She's great. I've met a lot of, like, it's interesting because, like, when you're in this space and there's other females, there's different reactions, and she has been, like, absolutely fantastic and encouraging, and she is one of the biggest cheerleaders to all of us, people who stream and just people who make, and she and her husband have created a really nice community. You know, it doesn't, I hope they grow even more, but it's really nice. She always celebrates what people are doing, which is, it's important, because I think a lot of the time people forget that for the majority of people, this is a hobby. Yep. And you should enjoy your hobby. You should know, at the end of the day, it should be something that you enjoy, at least. So she brings the joy into it.
Absolutely. And you know what I think the conversation was a little bit more about that, because I came very, very close just to ditching the whole social media and 3D printing thing, like really, really close. And obviously going out to Mirth, doing that kind of stuff. And if you saw some of the reactions I got to doing a video on the Creality K1 and some of the comments that we got about that, and sometimes you do have to have a bit of a thick skin in this, you know, in this game. And in short, she pretty much restored my faith in humanity in that moment. So that's just to paint a bit of a picture there, exactly what I was getting at there. It was a poignant moment for me. And incidentally, as you'll see, hopefully in the next couple of weeks and months, there's a lot more going on in the background now, because of that moment. So it's a good thing. You know, it's a good thing. I think people, you know, being humble is a really important thing. I think you need to understand where you're at. I think you need to understand that everybody is human. They're in that space as well. Nobody's really above you. It doesn't really matter how many subscribers you've got or what really, you know, any of that. I hate that whole, I'm a YouTuber business, you know, because it's not that. It's, I create content and it happens to be on YouTube. It's not, you know, you're not above everybody else. You're not below anybody else. It just is what it is. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to kind of get your head around what that really means. And it's very, very important. I see it quite a lot with various creators, that they are perceived, and they perceive themselves as being up here, when actually, you know, sometimes a company or a manufacturer or whatever needs somebody that's just going to be open and honest. And, you know, a lot of the time that's kind of what they look for. So, yeah.
Questions here. I did want to highlight what Royal Nomi said earlier, though, that this isn't a competition. It's about sharing what we love doing with everyone, and helping others to get where they want to be on their journey. And that could mean, you know, giving someone the opportunity to have a free spool of filament, or if there was you know, if you finished with your 3D printer and you know that someone lives local, and you know you're getting something new, you give them your old printer, or you give it to a school. You know, there's all different ways. But the other thing is to celebrate people's accomplishments, and celebrate what people what opportunities people have. So I think